You got hair in your eye? Alright, what's up guys? My name's Cam, and in this video today I want to talk a little bit about progressive overload. Mainly just what it is, but also to give a lot of different examples of progressive overload, some that you may not have heard before or used. So with that being said, what is progressive overload? Basically, it's just finding a way to make your workouts more challenging the next time that you're in the gym. So you'll hear most people say, just add more weight, do more reps, do more sets. And these are all versions of progressively overloading, but they're not the only ways. And I feel like a lot of the ways that I'll provide here, like I said, are just a little bit different. So why would you do any progressive overloading? Basically it's really the only way to get stronger or improve in lifts, or to get faster in something, depending on what your goal is. It's really the only way to improve. If you just constantly do the same weight for the same number of reps, the same amount of sets every single workout, nothing is really going to happen. So before I get into some of the different ways to progressively overload, I just want to clarify that a lot of these are going to be based off of different goals. I understand not everybody has the exact same goal. So some of them might be better for strength, some might be better for hypertrophy, some might be better for power, whatever the case is. But again, they're all just different variations of progressively overloading. So just take that note. And then there also really is no real best way, in my opinion. Like I said, it's really just based off of goals and it's based off of the individual. With that being said, I'm going to start with the most common ways of progressively overloading first. And this is just simply by adding more volume. So you can add more weight. This is pretty obvious. If you're lifting, say, 100 pounds week 1 on your bench press, and you do it for 10 reps. Maybe week 2, you try 105 pounds. You might only get 8 reps, or you might get 10 reps again. Nonetheless, you've added more weight your second week in, and that is a version of progressively overloading. Another very common way to progressively overload is by just doing more reps. So keeping the weight the same, but increasing your reps. So again, similar example, you do 100 pounds week 1 for 10 reps. Week 2, you do the same amount of weight, but this time you do it for 12 reps instead of 10, right? So more volume, more reps, it's progressive overload. The third version, or the third way to do it, is by adding more sets. So maybe week 1, you do 100 pounds on the bench press for 10 reps, but you only do 3 sets. Week 2, say you do the same thing, 100 pounds for 10 reps on your for 3 sets. But this time you add a 4th set. Whether it's the same amount of weight, whether it's the same amount of reps, it doesn't really matter. You're just adding a whole nother set. So you could do your 100 pounds on your 4th set, but say you only get 4 or 5 reps. That's still progressive overload. You've still done more sets or more reps or more volume this second week in than you did the first week. So pretty simple. Another way is to just add another exercise. So week 1, say you, for your chest exercise, you're doing bench press and you do dumbbell flies. Week 2, maybe you do the bench press, you do dumbbell flies, and you throw dips in there as well, right? So again, pretty simple. You're just adding another exercise into it. All in all, it's just going to be more volume. Like I said, these are probably the most common ways to progressively overload, and these are the most common things that you'll hear a lot of trainers say, or you'll hear a lot of people say online. And then there's one more that I would say is pretty common, and that's shortening your rest period. So I don't know a lot of people that actually time themselves in between sets. Occasionally I will. Typically I'll shoot for a minute rest. I try not to do too long just because I don't like sitting there for such a long time. But say week 1, you do your bench press, 100 pounds, 10 reps, same thing. But say in between each set, you're resting for, 90 seconds, right? So a minute and a half. So say week 2 comes around, you do the same thing, but instead of resting for 90 seconds, you only rest for 60 seconds, okay? Again, shorter rest period. This is a version of progressive overload. You're making this more challenging, more difficult than you did week 1. Getting into some of the non-traditional ways, or some of the ways that at least I have not heard a lot of people talk about or seen online. with progressive overload. The first one is going to be better form with an exercise. So obviously you should have, somewhat decent form while performing any exercise just to prevent injury. But a pretty simple example on this is like a bicep curl. I'm sure you've seen people like swing the weight up as they're curling. An example of progressive overload here would be keeping your arms in a fixed spot and not swinging at all. So strictly using your bicep and only your bicep. Don't get your shoulders involved. Don't get your back involved at all. Just correcting your form and making it more challenging. The next example of like a different way to progressively overload here is by changing the angle of force. So what I mean by this is kind of hard to explain without demonstrating. I guess a good example would be, say, like a bicep curl, starting with your arm all the way down at your side. So you're straight down and doing a bicep curl, right? A way to change the force in this is to do like an incline curl, or you can do it with cables where your arm is starting back behind your body. Only key with this though is when you're curling, it's the same thing. You can't be swinging your arm or using any momentum. It has to be just a regular strict bicep curl, but starting with your arm back at a more lengthened position is going to be more challenging than having your arm, say, up in front of you or at your side or whatever. So just think about like a bicep curl. If you're starting here and curling, that's going to be a lot easier than if you're down at your side or behind your back starting the curl. Another example where you could do this too is think of like a Delt Raise where you're coming up sideways with a dumbbell. If you're using a dumbbell, the most challenging part of this exercise is going to be all the way at the top, just because gravity and force is pulling directly down. I don't know if I can explain this. Let me see if I can draw this. All right, so my wonderful little drawing here. Again, this is just regular Delt Raise, pretending these red circles here are, I don't know, plates or dumbbells or something. All right, so you're starting down at your side, and he's bringing the weights up, making almost like a perfect T here. The hardest part of this exercise is going to be at the top here, where the force of gravity is pulling directly down. All right, so again, compared to the second picture here, this is my wonderful drawing of my stick figure, and he's using a cable machine. This part right here is the cable. Again, this red part is like the handle, essentially. The difference with a cable versus the plates, like I said, with the plates or with dumbbells, the force of gravity is pulling straight down, so the hardest part is where your arm is at a perfect T. With a cable, the force is pulling kind of sideways at an angle. So the most challenging part of this exercise is when his arm, or when your arm is more or less like at your side and you're initiating the pull, right? So I would say like the first like 0 to 50% of the movement while using a cable is the most challenging part here, versus if you're using dumbbells, like the 50% to 100% in terms of range of motion is the most difficult part, again, with the dumbbells. So that's kind of what I mean when I say changing the angle. So again, apologies for the stick figure drawing there. I'm obviously not in a gym and I don't have weights with me, but I think you get the idea. So the next example I would give of progressively overloading is changing up your tempo. So you can do this in so many different ways. I'm sure you've all heard of time under tension, which is essentially like the amount of time your muscle is contracting concentrically or eccentrically or isometrically. But just by changing the tempo is a version of progressively overloading. So say you're doing a bench press and your typical bench press is just a regular, like you're starting at the top, you just come down at a normal pace, you don't really pause at the bottom, you just press straight back up, right? It'd be like, I don't know, 2 seconds down, maybe 1 second at the bottom, and then 2 seconds up towards the top. A way that you could progressively overload is slowing down your eccentric part, so coming down towards your chest. Maybe it takes about 4 or 5 seconds to come down, and then exploding out of that bottom part as fast as you can. Again, that's just another version of making your bench press more difficult than, like I said, just doing a traditional, I don't know, like 2 seconds down, 2 seconds up style. You can get a little bit more intense with this. You can do like 3 or 4 seconds on the way down. You can hold at the bottom for a couple of seconds, and then you can do like explode up, or you can go slow on the way up if you want. I would not recommend it though. It's very challenging. You're not going to get too much volume out of that. But nonetheless, like I said, these are just a couple of different examples on how you can progressively overload. It doesn't necessarily always have to be volume, especially when you get to a point where you plateau and it's just challenging to continuously up the weights every single time, just because unfortunately, like, you're going to plateau at some point. You're not going to be able to keep adding 5 pounds every single week to every single exercise. If that were the case, people would be bench pressing like 20,000 pounds probably. So yeah, and another reason too, I think a lot of people get really frustrated at that plateau point, and I'm sure it can be dangerous at times to just constantly be trying to increase your weight, increase your weight, increase your weight. If you're plateaued, like, chances are you're probably going to be stuck there for a couple of weeks, no matter what progressive overload you implement. And if, like I said, if you're trying to just keep adding 5 or 10 pounds, that can get pretty dangerous. So just be careful with that. And like I said, these were really just different ways to progressively overload. If you don't want to call it progressively overloading, that's fine. You can just like switch up your workouts essentially, right? Just a way to change things up. And like I said, kind of getting away from the whole thought process that you have to always add weights. You always have to do more reps of something. There are other ways to challenge your body and improve in the long run. So again, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully these are some examples that you haven't tried before. And if you do try them, let me know how they go. And if you have any other, I guess, examples or versions of your progressive overload or another way that I forgot to mention, feel free to leave that as well. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got. So have a good day.